For part two of this module 3, we are going to get deep into Social Security and really get an idea of how Social Security runs, where the money, how much money we have, where it's coming and going to and from, and to see how much could you expect to receive upon your retirement. So we'll jump in here and I give you an idea of what the law says about investing in the Social Security, where it's money put into an interest-bearing account. So I hear a lot of times from a lot of different people, well, Social Security will run out of money by the time I retire. And that's not true. As long as people are still working and paying into it, Social Security will never run out of money. Now, with people living longer and they've taken out more than maybe they've put in, then Social Security, you may not get as much as you would originally have expected. You may only get 90 or 85% of what your total expected would be. However, it's not going to run out of money, as you'll see here in just a few minutes. So how much is collected throughout the years? Right now, Social Security has a huge surplus, and it's not going to run out anytime soon. There's over almost $3 trillion in reserve, and I'm going to bring that up now. This is my first link, and I'm going to bring that up to show you that back when Social Security, when this chart is active here from starting in 57, you can see that this chart is in millions. So if you see 23,000, that's actually 23 billion that they have in assets at the end of 57. Now you look down and you would think that in the 70s they may have started getting worried, because the amount that was being paid out, the 69, for example here, 69 billion versus 67 billion being paid in, their Social Security is beginning to lose money. And the amount, this is the reserves, what they have left. And it's continually going down, all the way down to 24 billion. That's still a lot of money, but it's not going in the right direction. So people in the 70s could have been concerned about that. But then, as you can see, in the 80s, it started to grow significantly. In the 90s, even more so. By 2007, the highest year, there was 190 billion extra coming in than was being paid out. And at that point, they were up to 2.2 trillion in reserves. Now, as we head into the latter 20 teens, the number is starting to shrink again, and we're getting pretty low. And then 2018, it took a really big dip. We'll have to see if 2019 bears out and continues this, or if that was just a fluke. With that, though, we're still at almost $9 trillion in above where Social Security is not going to run out of money. So it's still going to be there for quite some time. At least there'll still be reserves there foreseeably for the next 20, 30, 40 years without even having to take anybody's percentage away. All right, so that kind of just gives you an idea of, if you wanted to look through that chart in more detail, how much money is coming in. So just one quick look here. This would be $1 trillion came into Social Security, and $1 trillion left Social Security in this year, whereas 996 billion came in in 2017, and 952 billion went out. So that's quite a bit of money that's coming and going. All right, so who's qualified to draw Social Security? Notice here you have to have at least 40 quarters of coverage, and they do it in quarters. 40 quarters basically means 10 years. And for it to count as a quarter of coverage, you have to earn at least $1,360, and that's for this year in 2019. It's been continually going up throughout the year. So last year it was less, and then even in prior years it would have been a lot less. So to give you an idea, I've pulled up there's another chart here that you can look at to see when are you actually covered to begin to receive Social Security if you would become disabled and ultimately to be retired. You can read through here to be fully insured and to be permanently insured, what you have to do or what you have to have accomplished. Basically, you have to have at least one quarter for each calendar year after you turn 21. Then be at least, and this is by normal standards here, there are a few exceptions, be at least 62. If you're disabled, you can get Social Security earlier than that. And we'll look at the Social Security here towards the end of this, the disability piece here in a little while. All right, so how many people are actually collecting Social Security? This was one of my next screenshots. This one was this was about the credits being earned, and you can look at that in our past little segment here. This is showing you, this is in thousands again, in thousands instead of the last chart was in millions, but this is the number of people who are actually collecting Social Security. I thought this was very interesting. So this is as of June 19, the most recent that's available. Some of you will be watching this later on. It'll be close. You can easily go to this same website and to see what the difference is between 2019 when I'm doing this and whatever month and year you're in. It usually lags about a month and a half. So as I'm doing this in the early part of August, it's still showing June. So beneficiaries, there are 68, and this would be 68. This would be 7,000, 57,000. So this is 68 million people are receiving Social Security, all types of beneficiaries. Those are retired are, as you would expect, the higher percentage. There are still quite a few who are disabled and receiving Social Security. So I thought that was an interesting chart. This is just even more of a breakdown of who's getting Social Security and how it's broken down even between survivors of the people who have died, and then the spouse continues to get Social Security. We'll see how that works here in just a few minutes, but in a sense, a spouse would never even have to work and still receive Social Security as long as her husband or it's the other way around, his wife worked and had full benefits. When the spouse dies, then that surviving spouse gets to take over the working spouse's Social Security. And even kids of disabled or kids of retirement workers, as long as they're under a certain age, can still get monthly benefits. So I've just pulled out a few figures here to let you know, and I compared it to previous. You can see that more people are drawing Social Security. It's gone from 63.5 million, whereas a little over a year ago, it was at 62.2 million. So an extra 1.3 million people are drawing Social Security. And that's why, remember back to this fund here, more people are drawing Social Security. So that means less people are putting in. More people are drawing. It's just a double-edged sword. It's going to hurt both ways. So that's why our numbers are going down. The amount of reserves that we're bringing in over, or the collections are higher still, but not much than what is being paid in. Okay, so we go back to, and you can kind of get an idea that the number of those who are disabled has went up, but not nearly as much. So 10.03, which is back in June, down from 10.37. So I actually misspoke there. It actually has went down. The number of disabled people drawing Social Security hasn't gone down a lot, but it has gone down about 300,000 or thereabouts. All right, so let's keep going down. If you wanted to know, in that chart there, it says something in the chart that I just looked at, supplemental Social Security. I wanted to give you an idea of what that was. Basically, that's extra money that goes to the very low income, and it's not actually part of the regular Social Security. All right, so when can I start drawing Social Security? The first chart here I give you, I think, has the best overview of that. And then you're going to see when it's most beneficial for you to take it as well, if you want to take it early or later, how that's going to help or hurt you. But basically, for most of you who are taking this class, you're going to be down here in the bottom. 1960 or later is your year of birth. So at the current time, your normal retirement age is 67. Now, I don't exactly remember when it was, but it was about 10 years ago, thereabouts. that the normal age to receive Social Security was 65 for anybody. So this 67 isn't by far set in stone, but that is what we're working on as of 2019. Now in 2029, that could be a different number. Now my next chart here gives you a real good idea of how much you can expect to receive of your normal retirement amount. So whatever you were supposed to get, say it was $1,000 a month. And if we come down, and you can see the ages up here. So I'm going to keep the last two, the first one, and then the last two as our kind of remember. This is the earliest you can get Social Security normally. This is your normal age for those born after 1960. And this is the last time that you would want to, otherwise it doesn't really help you. If you wait past 70, you might as well start taking it. So let's remember those three columns. If we come down here to those born in 1960 or later, you can see that if you start taking the Social Security at 62, you're only going to get 70% of what you normally would. So if it was $1,000, they're going to cut that by 70. They're going to cut that at 70% and say you only get 700. Whereas if you wait till you're 67, the full retirement age for that individual, you get the full 1,000, 100%. And then if you wait every year after that, so if you wait till you're 68, you get 108, then 116, and then up to 124 is the max you can receive, 124%. So if you were to get $1,000, you would be earning $1,240 if you waited till 70 every year. So you think, well, I might as well wait till 70. But you're going to see here in just a minute or two that necessarily waiting isn't always the best option. Sometimes it is. It can be, but not always. So that's what leads me here to my next question that I get. Should I withdraw at 62, 67, 70, or somewhere in between? A lot of factors go into play here. Basically, if you draw from Social Security, what that allows you then not to do is not to draw from your personal retirement account, like your 401k. Your 401k is your money. You get to pass that on to your heirs. Not so much with Social Security. Social Security you can pass on to your spouse, but that's about it. When you die, your Social Security ceases with you, and your kids don't get extra Social Security just because you died early, for example. So in those cases, one of the main arguments to start taking Social Security at least by 67, if not before, is so you are getting money that's entitled to you, but you're not dipping into your own personal fund that your heirs would be able to still enjoy. I hope that makes sense. So, but also, if you're going to dip into Social Security early or not, depends on your family history and how long you think you're going to be able to live and enjoy the quality of life that you have in your 60s. Will you still have that in your 80s or beyond? You need to really consider that, because it doesn't do you much good to have a whole lot of money unless you plan on giving it to your heirs when you're 80 and 90 and you can't do anything with it anyway. How badly do you need the money? At 67, that's going to play a major factor, or even earlier. So what I've done is I've created an Excel sheet, and I'll pull that up now, then I'll this is just a quick little summary. But what I did in my Excel sheet is I assumed an $1,883 a month Social Security payout. That would be before if you had any Medicare taken out or anything like that. And what that averages out to is a very reasonable average Social Security as of 2019 of $22,596 a year. That's how much you would expect if you received it in 67, at the age of 67. So I said, okay, what's the break-even point? If I start receiving it at age 62, I'm getting 70%. And that would be $15,000 a year instead of $22,000. Am I okay with that? First of all, I got to know that. But then I've got to also realize that I'm collecting money here that if I waited till I was 67, I have an extra $79,000 that I've collected that this person doesn't have anything yet. So is it worth it for me to, even though take a hit, to keep collecting money while I'm younger? So what I've done is I've taken the cumulative. I keep adding in 15,000 every year, or in this case, 22,000 every year. And you'll see that by the age of 78 is about that break-even point. Somewhere between 77 and 78, you would have the same amount of earnings in your bank if you hadn't taken anything out. You would have withdrawn the same amount. So if you don't think you're going to live past 78 because of poor health and family history, you think normal dying age for you is low to mid 70s, you would highly want to consider taking Social Security out at the age of 62. However, if you have a spouse that you do think will live a long time and that spouse hasn't worked, then you may not want to take it out at 62 because that spouse will then be capped at your amount at that 70% and can never get more than that. So there's different things you have to think about. And what I then did is somebody who waited until 70, it's going to take them 10 years to catch up. So maybe not even quite 10 years, more like 9. It's closer at 9 than it is the 10. But at the 10th year, the person goes past them who waited till age 70. So if you think you're going to live and be in good health till at least 80, you may want to wait till you're 70 years old or at least 67 because the amount that you earn goes up dramatically after that. By the time you're 90, you've collected over $130,000 more than the person who started at 62. That's a lot of extra money. But if you're going to die at the age of 80, it doesn't really matter. You might as well collect it at 62. So that is a prime example of the things you need to consider if you're going to take money out at 67, 70, or 62, or anywhere in between. I'll make this Excel sheet available in our class so you can have a good idea and study it to tell your own parents or grandparents or even yourself. All right, this is just a quick little question here. If I start drawing money out of Social Security, but I'm still working, is there a penalty? And the answer is, depends on your age. If you start taking money out of Social Security and you are under your full retirement age, which for most will be 67, then yes, there is a limit to how much Social Security you can receive before deductions are taking place. Notice it's after you earn, and if you're under the age of 67, and if you earn more than $17,000 in a year, you're going to start having $1 reduced for every $2 that you earn over that limit. So if you earn, and I gave a little example here, if you are to get $12,000 a year from Social Security and you make $20,000, so you're over the limit, what you need to do is figure out how much are you over the limit. So that's close to $2,500, not exact. And then if you divide that by 2, because for every $2 you earned over, there's 1 that they take out. So they're going to take out $1,880 from your $12,000. Therefore, you're only going to get the difference there, which would be about $10,800. However, once you hit the age of 67, you can make as much money as you want, and there is no what is considered, I guess, a penalty. When should I apply to get Social Security and Medicare? Basically, the deferred answer here is 3 months before you wish to start receiving it. You should apply for it. Medicare, you can start getting that at 65. Still, it doesn't matter when you take Social Security. So Medicare, before you hit the age 65, you'd want to start applying if that's what you want to do. And then Social Security, whatever age is appropriate for you. Can my non-working spouse or a low-earning spouse still receive Social Security? And the answer is definitely yes. And what I'll go in, as you can see here, this spouse of a retired worker. So if your spouse is receiving Social Security, you as the spouse could also get some of theirs. And the two things here, you don't have to meet both of these, but one of them, if you have a child that's under age 16 or disabled, then you can start taking money out and start earning. That's fine. But for most people, they're going to be in the second category where the spouse has to be at least 62 years old, just like the normal worker does. And that the penalty will also apply to the spouse. So if they start taking it at 62, they're going to be affected. And it also, we're going to see, I tell you here, and then I explain it a little bit more in detail later. Even a divorced spouse, if you were with your spouse married for over 10 years, for at least 10 years, then you are entitled to that spouse's Social Security, whether you're still married or even have remarried. You can still take that divorced spouse's Social Security as part of your own. Notice here the spouse can get as much as 50% of the worker's primary insurance amount. So if your spouse was getting $1,000 every month at retirement, you could get up to $500 even though you never worked a day in your life. However, if that spouse begins before normal age, then they will also get a reduced benefit. So if you were supposed to get $500 and you take it at 62, you're going to get 70% of that $500. However, if the spouse is caring for a qualifying child, the benefit is not reduced. So if you have a qualifying child and you are married to, let's say you're 55 and you're married to a 65-year-old and you have a qualifying child at home who's under 16, you could get your full amount and not be penalized while that child is still at the 16 or older. You may have to quit getting your retirement once the child hits 16, but then you could get back on it at 62 or 67. All right, we're going to talk about what happens when the spouse dies here in just a minute. Can my dependent child, so we just saw that the spouse can get Social Security. Can my dependent child or grandchild receive Social Security? And the answer is yes. Minor child who's under 18 or still in high school under 19 can get it. And as long as they are under 22 and they're considered disabled, they can get Social Security. Notice here they can get as much as 50% of the worker's primary amount. But notice here it's limited to the family max. So you can't keep getting more and more money, the spouse and the kid and the next kid. Notice here it's a range, but typically your family, the main spouse who is working, the spouse who is not working is maybe drawing, and then the kids, you can get up to potentially 180% and then no more. So you can't have, say, 5 kids all drawing 50%. That wouldn't work because the main spouse would have 100%. The non-working spouse would have a next 50%, and then the next child would maybe get 30, and then that would cap you out. Nobody else would be able to get money at that point. So what happens when the main worker dies? Well, then the widow actually steps in and can take the main worker spot and receive that full 1,000. Instead of the 500 that they were getting, they can take the full 1,000, or they can continue with their own retirement Social Security. If their normal was 1,100, then they'll just continue with their 1,100. You don't get both. You get one or the other, whichever is higher. So you can receive 100% of the worker's benefits as early as age 60. So this is one of those exceptions. If your spouse dies and they were receiving the benefits and you are at least age 60, you could get their benefits as your own. And then this is another little category. I'll let you read through this. If you were divorced, what happens? All right, funeral expenses, Social Security pays very, very little, $255 for burial expenses. So when normal burial expenses may be $7,000 to $10,000, that is a very small amount. All right, so one of the key questions as we get towards the end here, how much should I expect to get when I retire? How Social Security does it is they base it on the past 35 years of your work history. And then they increase it for inflation. So I pulled up this site here. And they go back and you can go back further than this, but this one goes back to 1979. And it says if your normal earnings in 1979 were $10,000, well, when you put in the index factor, that's the same as making $47,000 today due to inflation. That's a big difference. And as you come down here, you'll see that the index factor continually goes down all the way until, so in 2017, 50,000 was the same as 52,000 today, just because of inflation. That makes sense. It goes up just a little bit, and then it just keeps going up and up a little bit compared to the normal worker. You can see the worker was maybe making a little bit of a raise. There was a slight dip here, but then a normal, just an average wage throughout the whole career and ending at 54,000. This is how they determine how much your wages will be based on. They're going to take this number when you've added up all of those indexed amounts, and then they're going to do the calculation, and you can figure up what is your average index monthly earnings. So you can follow these and see how to do that. But the main thing that I like to figure up then is how much should I expect to earn? So the maximum amount, the computation of my benefits here, my primary insurance amount, that's if I'm at 100% and I take my Social Security at age 67, that's how much I would expect to get. Notice you can't just put in all of your numbers back on this chart that I was at. If you made $2 million in 2014, you can't put in $2 million. You can only put in what the cap was for that year. So for our class in 2019, the cap is $132,900, but the cap back in 2007 wasn't that high. So you would have to cap every year if you made a whole lot of money at whatever the Social Security cap was, because you only paid money in up until that cap, just like what we had talked about last week. All right, so I've done a little example here, and hopefully you'll be able to follow along here. So I've determined that the average yearly earnings of any individual, so all they had to do was take all of these, the indexed numbers, add them up, and then divide by the total number of years. You add all those up and divide it by those number of years. Let's say it was 35 years. And I got it to be 45,000. I just made up that number. So I averaged 45,000 throughout my career. How much am I going to expect to get for Social Security? So we got to do what this chart tells us. If you take 45,000 and you divide that by 12, it's $37.50 a month. Okay, so then we take 90% of the first 926. Okay, we're definitely over 926, so 90% of that, 33. And then 32% between the amounts of, and that should be, let me change this, 926 and 5,583. Well, we didn't even make up to 5,583. So we're going to stop at what we made. If we would have made over the 5,000, then we would have stopped here, 5,583. But we're going to stop at our highest amount because we don't even have earnings up to this. So $37.50 minus the first 926, I've already counted that, so I don't recount it. Take that number and we get $903. So then if I add the two together, the 833 and the 903, my total PMI is the 1,737, or approximately $20,800 for the year. And that's based on an average annual salary of $45,000 throughout all the years that I've worked. So now if you look at it, 20,000 versus 45, that's 45% of your average earnings. Are you okay with that, knowing that it's going to be half of what you normally make? And that's your average earnings, 45,000. Maybe in your last few years of working, you were at your highest wages and you were making perhaps 55,000. So now you're only bringing in 37% of what you normally made before you retired. Can you live on 37%? Most people maybe would say, no, I can't. So that's why they have an extra 401k, IRA to make up the slack. Now, the one key thing with retirement people is, for the most part, not always, but Over half, I would say, have their house paid off, and most, if not all, would have their education paid off as well. And those are usually some of the two biggest debts. The only other debts they would possibly have is a car debt, and then vacation home and extra things like that that aren't absolutely essential. So at this point, what I would like you to do is try to figure out, try this example with an average yearly earning of $66,000. How much should this person expect to receive? So go ahead and pause the video now, and then I will pull up the answers, and we'll go ahead and pause, and then I'll bring this up in just a few seconds to go through the answers. All right, for this example, with a PMI of, and that should be 66,000 each. Okay. All right, so with a I'm sorry, I misspoke. This should have been 77,000, not 66. Some of you will be thinking, as I had 77 in your sheet and 66 on mine. What am I doing? Okay, so redo it again if you didn't already. Do it at what your actual notes say of 77,000. Okay, at 77,000, if you divide that by 12, it comes out to be 6417. So the first 926, still get that 833. Now, since we are over the 5583, we stop it at 5583. And all the money in between is we get 32%. So that's what it comes out to be. And then anything over the 5583, we get an extra 15% of whatever's left. That's an extra 125. So when you add up the 833, the 1490, and the 125, you get a total PMI of 2448, which comes out to be 29,000, almost 400 for your Social Security payment. Well, without having to do that calculation, is there a way for me to do it very quickly to figure out how much should I expect? And the answer is yes, the Social Security does have a calculator. And I'm going to pull up that link now. And you can see here, you enter in your the date of birth of whoever you're doing it for. You enter in their current earnings. This is where it's going to be the quick estimate, because just because it's your current earnings doesn't mean that's your actual yearly average over all the years, but it gets you at least somewhat close. And then you put in here, down here, the third thing you put in, you don't have to put anything here. You put in down here how much or when you expect to retire. So you might want to count up until you hit the age of 67. What month and year would that be? And then you simply hit it in today's dollars or in future dollars. It tells you what the amount could possibly be worth in 30 years, if that's when you're going to retire because of inflation. You can see it either way. So I've done an example here, and let's go through it. We'll take a few minutes and go through it. Date of birth, 1980 with 42,000. So 9/1/1980, 09/01/1980, 42,000, and for the retirement date, I have 9/2047. And if we look at that in today's dollars, I could expect to get $1,638 per month for retirement. And then you can see how much potentially your child and your spouse would be able to get if they after you die, so as a survivor. Okay. Now let's go back. What is your benefit estimate in today's dollars? So we just figure that out, 1,600, and then you just times that by 12 to get the yearly amount. What earnings is the program assuming you made in the year 2030? So here we see the earnings we used, okay? So in the year 2030, they assume that you're not making any raises, so you're only getting $42,000. So you could change that if you think that that's not going to be correct. So I put here, what if you enter a higher number over the 30 years? Assume 48,000 is used. So we're just doing to see how much different it is. So let's go back and let's put in 48,000. Actually, let's do it from this earnings page, because you anticipate making 48,000. And you can see the amount does go up in reflection of that. Now you're up to 1767. On my notes, I tell us, let's go ahead and revert it back to 42. What is your benefit estimate in inflated future dollars? Okay, so at 42,000. So I'm at 42,000, and I just want to click this guy instead. So we were at 1,600 and some a month. In $2047, that they anticipate that to be approximately $4,400 just because of inflation. I thought that is kind of interesting to go through. All right, you can read about for disabled what you have to. I'm not going to read down through this for you. It's kind of self-explanatory. If you're disabled, and can you get retirement or get Social Security? And the answer is yes, as long as you meet a few of the criteria. And then what about a spouse of somebody who's disabled or children? Can they get it? Yes. They still have that family max, though, of 150 to 158%. And then just a few quick facts that I thought were interesting as we finish up this segment in Social Security. The average amount that a married couple will get in Social Security is the $22.60 a month, whereas somebody who's single, the average amount that they get is $13.60 a month. So if you multiply the $13.60 times 12, that's an average Social Security of only $16,000. That's not a whole lot to live on. That is below poverty level. Notice that 22% of people live on Social Security alone who are retired. So 22% definitely live within the poverty level. And even more, 33% live on where Social Security is at least 90% of their income. They have a little bit coming in on the side, but not much. I thought these were some of the interesting facts. So who got the first Social Security number? You can read through this. No one knows for sure, but they kind of give you some estimates here. Who was the lowest Social Security number? Gives you the name here and their card number and what their Social Security number was. What a kind of a neat number to have. And then who was the first to receive? I thought this was really interesting. This guy paid 17 cents into Social Security when the Social Security was started up. And then he retired, and he was the first one to receive Social Security. This person, the first to receive monthly benefits, was Ida. So this guy was, and she retired in 1939 and started collecting at age 65. Notice here that she, for 3 years under the program, she contributed a whole total of $24.75 for those first 3 years. Her first check, when she started receiving Social Security, was for $22. So that was almost the same as she put in over the entire time. And then she died 35 years later, and she went on to collect $22,000 when she only put in 24. That is a great return on investment for that individual. All right, with that, we will come back in Module 4 looking at how do we determine our federal income tax. And at that, we will see you next time.